Wendy at Wendy A Studio. Normally I don't work with leather, but I was recently working on this crocheted handbag, and when I got done I decided I wanted to finish it off with a leather strap. Actually, this one takes two straps, one on each side. So in the spirit of using materials that I already had on hand, I decided to make a leather strap from these strands of leather that someone gave me a while back. And so I did a bit of YouTube watching and learned how to make a 5-strand braid. So I'm going to show you how to do the 5-strand braid and how I'm going to attach it to the handbag. To make the 5-strand braid, you're going to need 5 strands of leather. The leather that I used is fairly thick and stiff, and that will affect the finished look of the braid. So if you'll see here, it's a fairly open weave. If you're looking for a tighter weave, I would recommend something thinner and more pliable. Here's some jewelry suede cord, which would, I'm sure, make a nice braid. This strand here is 35 inches, and once it was braided up and I like trimmed the ends and everything, it turned out to be 28 inches, which I think is a nice length for a purse strap, so this will work fine. But do plan on losing some length through the braiding. Okay, what else? You are going to need 2 rings per strap that you make, and I chose these rings so that they fit the width of the strap with the 5 strands lined up next to each other. So it should fit in there. You don't want too much leeway here, but a little bit is okay. And also you're going to need a little bit of canvas. I used that to let me see, to glue the strands together afterwards. This is the back side, this is where the canvas is, so that I can put this through the ring and have everything be even at the end. And I used E6000 for the glue. It's industrial strength, so I expect it should stay together well, and some tape to help keep your ends in place. Okay, oh, one more thing. You will want, just realized I still have something on the board. You will want a clipboard to help keep your work in place. Go ahead and take your 5 strands and find the front side. So in this case, one side is like smooth leather and the other side is suede. So I'm putting the suede on the back side and the smooth leather on the front side towards me. Here are my 5 strands, and I'm going to keep them roughly even so I don't waste any leather. And take a piece of tape just to keep them in place while I'm maneuvering. And then this way, when I take this out at the end of the braiding, my ends don't unravel. I don't want to lose all that braiding work. To start your braid, go ahead and clip your strands into your board. And then grab your strand on, I'm starting on the right hand side, it doesn't matter which side, but right hand side, and then it's going to go over the one next to it and then under the strand in the middle. And that's all you're going to do with that first strand. Now you're going to go to the left side and over the one next to it and under the strand in the middle. And now you've completed one round of your weave. So we'll go back to the right hand side and repeat. You're going to go over the one next to it and under the strand in the middle. And on the left side, over and under. So this really is a lot like weaving, if you're thinking about it in terms of the over-under pattern. Over, under, over, under. And then every so often you're going to want to straighten out the ends here so they don't get tangled. And keep on going. Keep in mind as you're working that in order to keep a nice, neat, and even look along the front of this, you want to make sure that you are not twisting your strands. For instance, when I'm bringing this piece over, I'm keeping the same side facing me, and I am not letting it turn as I braid. Also, you want to pay attention to keeping evenly spaced open spaces. You can get away with a little unevenness, but you know, if this piece is very loose, that's going to be noticeable. So try to keep even spacing, and also keeping the angle of your strands parallel. So if you see this strand and this strand, I want them parallel. So I don't want it to end up opening up here more than it is here. So as you're going along, you're gonna adjust the tension, and see this thumb here, I'm kind of adjusting the spacing a little bit. Those are all things you want to pay attention to as you're going along, and you'll end up with a even braid that looks professional as opposed to like homemade. I'm getting close to the end here, and I'm going to look at my shortest strand, which is this one. I want about 2 inches. This is about 2 inches here, plus a little bit for trimming and making it even. I'm making 2 of these, so I need them to be the same length. So I'm going to go ahead and just tape this off for a minute to keep it in place and compare them. I noticed a couple things as I was comparing my 2 straps, which you don't really need to worry about if you're just making one strap, but I noticed that my second one was a little bit I braided it wider than this one. And so I tugged on it a little bit, and that kind of adjusted it somewhat to be the same width as the first one. So, you know, when you're done, you can kind of work with it a little bit if you need to. That also made it a little bit longer, which I needed, so that I can even up these ends to the same length. And on this end, I will actually unbraid the second one just a little bit and then even up these ends as well. So just a couple things to look out for if you're making 2 braids. Okay, I think that's pretty close. So your next step is to take one end and get a piece of canvas. You're going to line up the top end of the canvas right with where your braid ends, and then you want to have some extra around the edges, which you can cut off later. So now grab your glue, and you're going to take your tape off without losing your braid. And now I'm going to line up my ends so they're right next to each other. Keep a hold of that and apply the glue. You know what? This is going to help. Tape down the end of the canvas that's next to you and start spreading some glue on here. You don't want it to be very thick because then it's going to bleed through to the back side of the canvas and glue itself to the paper. So you don't need a ton. Also, you don't want the glue to squish through between your bits of braid. You might want to take a bit of paper and just kind of smooth it out. Now I can just push that down onto my canvas. You want to get your strips of braid, like your strips of leather, as close to each other as possible. And now I'm going to tape over the top of this. Keep everything in place while it dries. Okay, so there's that end, and now I'll work on the second end. Oh, also make sure that you are gluing the back side of your strap down. So in my case, it's the suede side. Part of the reason for having extra canvas here is that it would be really difficult to line up everything exactly, like have the glue all in the right place and have the edges of the canvas and the leather meet. So if you trim everything at the end, you can cut it all at once and everything will be even. I noticed when I was watching some leather working on YouTube that a lot of leather workers start with a strip of leather, a solid strip, and then this end right here would be left uncut, and then they would cut these bits here for the braid, so they could skip this step that I'm doing. But if you're starting with pre-cut strands, this was just my my solution to keeping the ends together. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry. And now let's see how this went. So I did have a little bit of glue seep through and stick to the paper, but I think by the time I bend it over and attach it to the rings, it won't be noticeable. So now we get to trim this up and make it look nice. I'm just going to take my scissors and cut as close to this leather as possible. I do have a little paper on the back of this one too. Looks like I got glue on the leather itself. Oh. And then I'm going to trim this end so that it is 2 inches from the end of the braid to the end of the strap. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my cutting mat to measure. Okay, there's one. At this point, you're going to need some kind of clip. Use what you have on hand. I have one of these. You could use something like this. It's a quilt clip. Clothespin would probably work, one on each side. So just see what you have on hand. This would probably work if it was bigger, but this is a very tiny one, so it wasn't thick enough or big enough to go around the thickness of the strap. What we're going to be doing is putting some glue on the canvas side and wrapping this this end around the ring and then clamping it until it's dry. So if you look at this, you can see that I do not want glue on this bent section because then it will be stuck to the ring. I just want glue like on the first 1/4 inch here. So I'm gonna kind of bend it to mark my bend line. There's my bend. Now I'm gonna grab my glue and just put a little bit on the very end. And I think I might have got too much. So I'm just gonna wipe off some of the glue from the ends here because it's gonna squish out. And I don't want that. Okay. So I've got my ring. I'm gonna insert this without touching the ring and go ahead and bend it over. I can see that some glue is squishing out, so I'm going to wipe that off right away. And now I can take my clips and secure them on here. And hopefully that will keep everything smushed together nice and tight until the glue dries. And once the glue is dry, then I'm going to go ahead and wrap some leather for a finished look. Now, since this is already attached to the purse, I need to make sure that the orientation of this strap stays straight and not twisted as I go around to my other ring. Okay. Looks like I've got a bit of glue on my paper here, so I'm just going to pick that up and spread that around a little bit. Okay. All right, I guess I'll be back in another, I don't know, 12 hours or so to give this a chance to really get good and dry. It's been about 24 hours since I glued the strap onto the ring, and so it should be good and dry now. And this is what it looks like. To finish this off, I went ahead and worked on the first strap. I wrapped leather around to kind of just make it look more finished, I guess. It hides this edge here. So now I'll show you how to wrap your strap, and that will finish off this process. So you're going to take your cord, and you want to figure out what length you need. So I wrapped it around 3 times. So, and that's starting from the back So 1, 2, 3, and on the back side, you start on one edge and you end on the other edge. So there's a little extra here, which I'm gonna glue this down, and when it's dry, then I'll trim off the extra. So that's okay that there's a little extra there. Make sure you have some clamps on hand. Take your glue and one of your strips of leather and apply a bead of glue. Go ahead and kind of smush it into the leather. You don't want too much on top, otherwise it'll smush out where you don't want it. Okay, now I want to be sure that the front side is parallel with this bar. So you'll notice the back is a little bit slanted, and that's because each wrap has to move down a little bit. So you're going to start your wrap on the front so that you can make sure it's square. And I'm going to leave enough extra on this side so that it will cover the back side. You want this as close to your final position as possible so that you don't get glue in unwanted places, but there is some room for adjustment. Okay, I've got my third wrap on the front side. So on the back side, now I can lay the ends in place. Put my clamps on. Okay. You might end up like I'm doing and pushing in on the edges to make these flush with each other. Now we can do our second one. I'm making this parallel with this edge here, or flush with it. You can kind of see through the gaps here.